Look at this image. It's one of the most recognisable album covers in rock history. The four faces of Kiss: the Demon, the Star Child, the Spaceman, and the Catman. In 1979, this image was a promise to millions of fans. A promise that the band of brothers was back. But that promise was a lie. When you drop the needle on Dynasty, the drumming you hear on 8 out of 9 tracks isn't the man on the cover. It isn't Peter Criss. It's a ghost. This is the story of a secret that tore the hottest band in the world apart. It's the story of a brutal studio decision, a cover-up that lasted for years, and the moment Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley decided that the brand of Kiss was more important than the members of Kiss. Welcome to the recording of Dynasty, where the music was disco, the drummer was a hired gun, and the deception changed the band forever. To understand why the Dynasty sessions became a crime scene of authenticity, we have to set the stage. The year is 1979. Kiss is not just a band, they are a walking, breathing corporation. They are coming off the massive marketing blitz of the 1978 solo albums, and the NBC movie Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park. Financially, they are titans. But internally, they are rotting. The 4 solo albums were supposed to give the members breathing room to prevent a breakup. Instead, they just highlighted how far apart they had drifted. And no one had drifted further than the Catman, Peter Criss. In January 1979, the band convened in New York City. They booked time at 2 legendary locations, Electric Lady Studios and the Record Plant. The mission was simple: record the return of Kiss album. It had to be huge, it had to be slick, and it had to capitalise on the current trends of pop and disco. But the moment the red recording light turned on, everyone in the room realised they had a catastrophic problem. The heartbeat of the band, the drummer, was missing in action, even when he was sitting right behind the kit. Enter Vinnie Poncia. Vinnie was hired to produce Dynasty for a very specific reason. He had produced Peter Criss's 1978 solo album. The band, particularly Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, hoped that Vinnie's rapport with Peter would coax a great performance out of him. They thought Vinnie was the Peter Whisperer. But Vinnie Poncia knew something the others were trying to ignore. During the solo album sessions in '78, Vinnie had seen the deterioration firsthand. Peter had been involved in a serious car accident that injured his hands. On top of the physical trauma, Peter was deep in the throes of substance abuse. His focus was gone. His timing was erratic. When the Dynasty sessions began at Electric Lady, the reality was undeniable. They tried to track the songs. They really did. But the tapes don't lie. According to studio logs and later interviews with the band, Peter's playing was unusable. We aren't talking about a missed beat here or there. We are talking about a drummer who could not physically or mentally keep up with the new, polished direction the band was taking. Gene Simmons later described the situation as a professional necessity. He said, Peter had succumbed to the rock and roll lifestyle. The band was bleeding money by the hour in the studio, waiting for Peter to get it right. Vinnie Poncia, the man hired to manage Peter, ultimately became his executioner. He went to Gene and Paul and delivered the verdict: we can't get this done with Peter. They faced a choice: delay the album and risk the Kiss empire crumbling, or replace their founding drummer in secret. They chose the latter. The solution to their problem was a South African drummer named Anton Fig. Fig was a session ace. He was sharp, technical, and hungry. Ironically, he had played on Ace Frehley's solo album, so the band knew he could deliver the goods. The switch happened fast. Anton Fig was brought into the record plant under the cloak of secrecy. This wasn't just a guest spot. Anton Fig ended up playing drums on virtually the entire record. Listen to the opening track, I Was Made for Loving You. That disco beat, that relentless machine-like hi-hat that drives the song, that is pure Anton Fig. It required a level of precision and stamina that Peter, in his condition, simply didn't have. Anton later recalled the awkwardness of the situation. He was recording tracks for one of the biggest bands in the world, knowing he would never get his face on the cover. He was a ghost player. The difference in style was stark. Peter Criss was a jazz-influenced drummer. He had a swing. He played behind the beat. Anton Fig was a precision striker. This change in personnel fundamentally altered the sound of Kiss. Dynasty sounds unlike any previous Kiss album, not just because of the disco influence, but because the engine of the band had been swapped out. There was only one exception: the song Dirty Livin'. This was Peter's song. It was the only track on the album where Peter Criss actually played drums. Why? Because the band felt they couldn't completely erase him from his own composition without causing an immediate implosion. It was a token gesture, one song to keep the peace. The rest was Anton. On May 23, 1979, Dynasty hit the shelves. And this is where the story shifts from a studio struggle to a massive public deception. If you bought the vinyl in 1979 and flipped it over, you saw the credits. Kiss is Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. There was no special thanks to Anton Fig. There was no asterisk. Gene Simmons and the management team made a calculated decision. In their eyes, Kiss was like Mickey Mouse. It didn't matter who was in the suit, as long as the ears were there. They believed that telling the fans the truth, that the Catman was unfit to play, would shatter the illusion of the four superheroes. So they lied. But the hardcore fans, they knew. They listened to tracks like Charisma or Magic Touch and realized the feel was wrong. The swing was gone. The fills were different. This created a cognitive dissonance for the fan base. They were looking at a picture of Peter Criss, but their ears were telling them it was someone else. It was the first crack in the trust between Kiss and their Kiss Army. Rumours started to swirl in the music press. Was Peter leaving? Was he sick? The band maintained the united front in every interview. They went on TV in full makeup, laughing and joking, pretending they hadn't just used a mercenary to record their platinum album. This leads us to the conflict that defines the Kiss legacy, the clash between art and commerce. Over the years, this deception has been a sore point for fans. While there are no transcripts of fans screaming at Gene in the street in 1979, specifically about Anton Fig, mostly because the internet didn't exist to spread the confirmed credits yet, the resentment built up over time. When confronted with this in later years, Gene Simmons' defense has always been brutally pragmatic. His argument is simple. The fans want the show. They want the logo. They want the hit songs. Gene views the Dynasty sessions not as a betrayal, but as a rescue mission. In his narrative, he and Paul saved the ship from sinking. If they had let Peter play, the album would have been a disaster. If they had fired Peter publicly, the tour would have collapsed. But for the purists, Dynasty marks the moment Kiss sold its soul. It was no longer a band, it was a brand. The chemistry that made alive. And Destroyer So Dangerous was replaced by studio perfectionism and hired hands. The tragedy is that the Dynasty tour would be the last time the original four would tour together for nearly 20 years. The deception in the studio bled onto the stage. Peter's playing on the tour was erratic. Tensions were high. And by the end of the cycle, the Catman was effectively out of the band, though the official announcement wouldn't come until later. It took decades for Anton Fig to get the credit he deserved. Today, history recognizes him as the MVP of Dynasty, the man who saved the record. But in 1979, he was just a dirty secret hidden behind the makeup. The recording of Dynasty was the end of the innocence for Kiss fans. It proved that the band was willing to sacrifice truth for the sake of survival. They replaced their drummer, kept the face, and sold the lie. It was a brilliant business move and a musical success. I Was Made for Lovin' You became a global smash. But the cost was the integrity of the original lineup. What do you think? Was Gene Simmons right to replace Peter Criss to save the album? Or should they have been honest with the fans from day one? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into rock history, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the studio.